Hello, this is Mr. Parks from Risen Christ Lutheran School with another homework help video for 6th grade for Module 4, Lesson 1. So after doing some work with greatest common factor and least common multiple and working with fractions, we are now going to go back to working with decimals, which we haven't done since probably around Christmas time last year, maybe a little bit into the spring. So we're going to review what our steps are going to be. We're going to see a picture very similar to one that we might have used last year, and I'll give you guys some assistance in figuring out what we're doing with that. So we have a 10 by 10 grid, kind of represents a 100 block, represents one whole. We have 100 squares, so each square represents 1/100th, written as a decimal or a fraction. And so we are going to find the sum of 13/100ths plus 58/100ths using this. And so what we can do is go ahead and represent that so by coloring it in. So I'm going to use red for the 13/100ths part. And then we could go ahead and skip over and use green to represent the 58/100ths part. So I'm actually going to do something a little strange here. So I'm going to start with my 5 groups of 10 here. Let's see, 3, 4, 5. We'll just kind of squiggle our way up through here and kind of fill that in. So I have 8 more blocks that I need to shade in. So I'm going to start here. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we have one extra one out here. So all of these should be shaded in. And with a pencil, this is much easier to do, but this should at least give you kind of an idea of what we're working with. So that's what we would do. Now, another way that we could do this is to go ahead and leave a gap and start shading in the other one from the right-hand side, but normally I let students use colored pencils for this. So we would represent that by shading in 13 blocks. We would represent this part by shading in 58 blocks, and then we would count up the number of squares. And so since we're working with hundredths, we just need to make sure that we line up the numbers correctly. So this would be a good thing to remind everyone of. Everything lines up in the middle at the decimal point. So if we have extra values represented, let's say that we added an extra 1 here, I would need to add an extra digit up here too. We're not going to just line everything up straight from the right. We have to line it up with the decimal point to make sure that we have the correct place values represented. So when we add, we are going to end up with 71. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 complete rows filled in plus 1 extra block. That is going to give us 71 and 71/100ths. The 0 in front is optional. I like having it there. I don't always use it when I'm doing things in class just because of time. So let's look at one more example real quick. Similar to adding whole numbers, we need to write the numbers so the places are aligned. So I just gave you an example of that. We have a chart that helps us with that on this particular part here. So we are going to be underlining 26/100ths of a pound of red grapes, and we are going to be underlining 34/100ths of a pound of green grapes, and we want to know how many total pounds of grapes we bought. So for this, we would go ahead and line everything up. And then when it's time to add, we can draw our line here, and then we would go ahead and add straight up and down. We need to carry a 1 here. And so do I need to regroup? Yes, I absolutely do, because I have to carry a 1. And so we bought, for this problem, Robert bought 60/100ths. We could also drop this extra 0 off and say that we bought 6/10ths of a pound. But usually I'm not going to worry about dropping extra zeros off because that could cause some errors. So how is adding decimals different from adding whole numbers? That would be something that we'll talk about in class. But again, for instance, we're going to line it up to the decimal point, not just to the right-hand side of the number. Again, for reasons I mentioned earlier, if we had extra place values, we need to add in extra zeros to represent where that place value doesn't exist in the other number to make sure that we do everything correctly. So that's what we're working with for today's lesson. It should be a pretty easy review since we're kind of going back to something that we did last year. The demands for the 6th grade level work are not significantly more difficult. We just may have to do a couple extra steps, or we might have to do more than 2 numbers every now and then. So hopefully this video helps. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me a text or email for my Risen Christ students or their families, and I can try to help you work through individual homework problems as you need help. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next video.